This is Mike, and today we're going to show you how to set up a Silent Hill style of controls in Game Creator 2. So we're in a safe place here in this Silent Hill game, but Silent Hill had a, if you look at the way the movement works, Silent Hill had a sort of a follow camera as well as a tank style control. So if you press left and right on the D-pad, he would rotate, and then up and down would go forward and backwards. So that's the basic controls for a Silent Hill style game. And the camera is not controllable by the player. So they had a button where you press the L2. Well, you can't do it in every place, but what I wanted to do is set up just the basics and actually improve on the camera system, because the camera system is very hard to control in this game, and oftentimes you can sort of get lost with it. But I think Game Creator 2 can do a better job than Silent Hill did of this tank movement style. But let's just go back to Game Creator 2 and see if we can set up this same type of movement and have it work with the input system from mappings from the new input system. So we just have a basic scene now. If I look at my assets here, we already have an input system set up in the input actions here. So if I look at that, we have movement set to WASD on the keyboard, the left stick on the gamepad, and the D-pad as well. So any of those will do the movement. The first-person camera, we have a first-person camera which sort of tries to replicate what Silent Hill did when you press the L2 on the gamepad. So I have it set to left shoulder and one on the keyboard, but and then we have interact set up. We're not going to do interactions in this video. And the run is set to left shift or the button west, which was on the gamepad, which is the original Silent Hill run was a button. You'd press down on the button. So that there was a little tricky to get to work with the input system, and we'll go over that as well. I also have a look thing here with the right stick and the mouse position, but I don't think we're not going to use that in this video. So we're just going to focus on the movement for now, and maybe the run. And so let's set that up. So what we want is we'll just create a new plane, and we're going to get like 20 by 20 ought to be enough. We're going to give it the dark texture, and we're going to create the player, game creator, player. And by default, the player is set to input move of primary motion, and we have okay, so the rotation is pivot. That's the default. And let's see, we're down in the floor a little bit. That means the plane is not exactly in the right place. So let's reset that, and now we're on the floor. And so just by default, this is and it will use the left stick on the controller will work, as well as WASD. And this is just by default. This is not using my input action map, so D-pad is not working at all on that, just the left stick and WASD, because that's when you set it to primary motion, that's going to be your WASD. Like it tells you what that is. It's under usage, it tells you it's WASD and left stick on gamepads. So, but what if you wanted to remap that to the D-pad, for instance? So we would want to use the input system input action instead. But before I do that, I'm going to set up a camera shot. So let's look at creating a camera shot. I'm going to create a third person camera. And we always say avoid clipping. Instead of fixed position, we went third person. And we're going to set up some of these options. We don't want to do target zoom because there's no zoom. We need to be at about, I think, 0.6. If you look at Silent Hill screenshots of the interface or of the game. So if you look at that screenshot here of Silent Hill, the character is basically in the middle of the screen. He's sort of, the full body is visible. So the camera should be like that. The only thing about Silent Hill is, like, this is the basic camera shot. In Silent Hill, all the time, it's going to change to fixed camera locations all the time, depending on where you are in the level. So we're not going to cover that in this video, but perhaps in a future video we'll go over how to transition and set up all these different camera shots that are in the scene for fixed camera and stuff like that, because Silent Hill used a lot of fixed camera shots as well. But I'm just going to look at the basic third person tank style camera shot that it used. You'll see that his whole body is visible. The character's entire body is visible, and he runs around pretty much like this, except he's not. You'll see that this character is to the left of the screen, whereas in Silent Hill he was right in the middle of the screen. So the first thing we're going to change is, after I set this main camera, the avoid clipping, turn that on. To zoom in, just use the default. Third person camera, we want to use the shoulder of 0. So that'll move it to the middle. And we don't want input rotate secondary motion with the mouse. In Silent Hill, you did not have that control over the camera. So let's just put that to none. And the max pitch, I set it down to 60 because it just gives too much clipping through things. Even with the avoid clipping set, if you give it the full 150. So let's take a look at what we have now. So we have him in the center, and okay, WASD goes not, but it's not the tank movement that we're used to from Silent Hill. So it doesn't feel the same. It's just a regular third person controller still. And you can't move the camera, and the camera does not follow him either. So what we can do with the camera is we can do the auto align. So let's set up auto align for 1 second delay, and then you'll see that when he turns, the camera will now follow. So it will follow. So if I put some objects in the scene, it'll be easier to see that. So let's put in a cube and move it. I'll just put in a few cubes of different sizes. And duplicate that. Just duplicate a few cubes out so that we have something for reference to see what's there. So let's see. Just a few. And then, so let's take a look. So, okay, so now the camera is going to rotate to be right behind him. So this is sort of similar. Like Silent Hill 2 did not do that, or Silent Hill didn't do that. I kind of like it better though, because it's easier to get around the environment. Because in Silent Hill, sometimes the camera wouldn't move at all, and it's like kind of confusing to move the character around. So I kind of prefer it this way. So we'll do this, and now we're going to change it to use tank controls, because Silent Hill had tank controls. So what we want to do is change the motion to, no, not the motion, where is it? Oops, we want to change the directional to tank. And you get an error saying tank requires a rotation of type tank. So we also have to change the rotation from pivot to tank, direction and tank. And that error doesn't go away automatically, but if you click off of player and back onto player, it will be fine. So now we have tank motion. So now the A and the D key, or the left and right stick, will just rotate the character around, and then the camera will follow because of the auto align, and then up and down or forward and backwards. So we can now do the tank movement, and that's how Silent Hill was controlled. So this is pretty good. One other thing, now we're still using the primary motion, so we're not using the D-pad. So let's say you wanted to have the D-pad controls too, because when I'm using my controller here, it's very sensitive. The left stick is very, very super sensitive. So I think the D-pad controls would actually be easier to use. So I'm going to set up the input system instead of primary motion, and we'll see a problem that occurs when that happens. So right now, so primary motion, input system, input action, and then we're going to set it to this input actions, asset, player controls, movement. So now we have the movement of the player under the input actions. So now when I can now control it with the D-pad. Actually, no. In order to do that, we also need to use a trigger, and we're going to use, we have to create a trigger to enable so on start, we want to enable the input action map, otherwise it won't work. The input map needs to be enabled first. So let's enable that, and we're going to enable player controls, which is all the mapped controls. So now we should be able to control it using the input system, and it's working. So if you'll notice, I'm using the left stick right now, and it is working. Left and right rotates the character, up and down goes forward and backwards. And now let's try the D-pad. Up and down on the D-pad they work to go forward and backwards. However, left and right don't do anything. So I'm not sure why the stick does this, but left and right doesn't do anything. This is not a bug. I initially thought this was a bug with Game Creator 2, but it's not a bug. It actually, there's another place where we have to set up the input so that it works. So if we go to where the rotation controls are, you'll see it says primary motion here as well. So what we need to do here is change it to the input action as well. So change that to the movement input action as well. So it'll do it for rotation as well. So tank controls, this player input is only the up and the forward and backwards, and then the rotation is a separate input. So now it should work though. Now the D-pad should fully work. So let's take a look. So we've got the D-pad, left and right are now working on the D-pad. So, and I find that the D-pad is less sensitive than the joystick, so it's a little bit easier to control. Tank controls are kind of hard because we're all used to the third-person controls now, but Silent Hill had these tank controls back in the day. So that's it for how you set up the controls like Silent Hill. It's pretty much the same thing. The only other thing was the zooming in on with the first-person camera. I'm going to switch back to the other scene, and we'll see how that's set up because there's a little bit more of a setup there. But if I select my Silent Hill setup scene and find my player underneath the ground. So my player, I've got this free asset adventure character. You can get it for free on the asset store. This city block is called New York City Block number 6, I think. It's free as well. So those can be downloaded free on the asset store. I've got a volume, or I've got fog set up. It's actually an asset called Better Fog to get this thick fog, like it's Silent Hill style fog. But anyway, let's see how this input is set up. So I've got this input manager, and when we perform the player controls first person camera control, which is the F or the left shoulder or the 1 key, then it changes the shot to the first person camera. So we have a third person and a first person camera set up. So, and then the trigger on input. So the thing is, this one wasn't possible to do using just the stock Game Creator 2 actions, because by default Game Creator 2 does not have an input release. It just has a perform, right? So so now holding down on the left shoulder button, it goes to first person view, and you can still control the character, although it's really good for looking around, but it sort of loses, like you're trying to move the character, and the reason is the character's been rotated, but the camera doesn't rotate with it, so it's kind of a little confusing there. But if you let go of the button, it will go back to third person. So how I did that was, you'll see this input action cancel trigger. That trigger isn't there by default. So we have to go into Game Creator, the Game Creator hub, and look for input action cancel and install that. And then you get this, it's a separate trigger, input action cancel. So that this is when an input button is released, right, through the input system. So that when the first person camera controls are released, it changes it back to the third person camera. So, and what else do we have? And I also did the same thing with the run controls, where I have input action perform run. So that one is on my controller, it's the Y button, but it's the leftmost button of the 4 buttons on the PlayStation controller, PS1 controller. And so input action cancel. So while you're holding it down, you're running, and then when you release it, you stop running. That's how Silent Hill did it with the run button. They had a separate button. They were using one of the four face buttons for running. So we can hold it down, and he runs, goes into run state, and then it is a little hard to do, but yeah. and then you release it, and it goes back to walking. So to set that up, you need to set the default state to walking instead of running. So because by default, the player, when you create a player, its default start state is set to run. This will be set to none, but there's some states that come with Game Creator 2. By default, you get a run, a sit, a walk, and an FPS. So by default, it's set to run because the player speed is set to it's set to 4, I think. So so what you do is set the speed. I think 2 is walk, and 4 is run. You can set it to 1 or 2, but and then what we do in the input manager when we activate the run, we are changing the player to state run. And if we look at that state, it sets the speed to 4. So that's how we know. And so then it will go into the run state. And this one uses, let's see. So we're using, if we go to the mannequin here, or the manful, it's using this complete locomotion animation controller that comes with Game Creator 2. So it knows that when the run speed, when it goes up to 4, it goes into run, and then it goes down to walk. So it knows to switch between running and walking based on the character speed. So the states control what the speeds are set to. So go back here, and then so we're running. We set the state to run. I changed the layer to 3, and the speed. I didn't touch any of that. Move speed player equals to 4. So you want to set this player's speed to 4, the move speed, and that's it. It will go into the run state. And to cancel it, we have the input action cancel. Run controls, and we stop the state in layer 3 with a 1-second transition and move the player speed back down to 2, the move speed back to 2, because that's the default. That's for the run state. So if we look at the states again, or for the walk state, if we look at the states, so let me go back here. So walk has a speed of 2. Run has a speed of 4. So that's why we set those to 4 and to 2. So then your running is set up properly. But in order to, you do need to download that input action cancel trigger. So that's all there is to it. That's basically everything when it comes to the basic movement of it, like a Silent Hill style game. So now we have the tank controls, the camera follows the player, and we can run, and it goes up to 4 and let go, and it comes back down to 1. And you can play around with the transition times because he sort of slides along a little bit. That's only because I have the transition set to a longer period of time, but this control seems to be okay for this type of a game. So you could use it for like a retro horror game. So that's it for now, and we will be back with another Game Creator 2 related video. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and we'll see you in the next one.